welcome to Alex and DJ Watch a Doc. I'm DJ.
I'm Alex. Welcome.
Welcome. This week we watched Val, which is about Val Kilmer. And if you are of a certain age, or within a broad range of certain ages, I guess, you know Val Kilmer. He's Val Kilmer.
I think us together are a broad range, and I know
think
him.
So as well. And I know him as well.
I know him a little differently than you do, just because I remember I was sort of age appropriate when he came onto the scene with whatever he was doing.
Mm-hmm. See, I like saw all those guys of that, like a lot of the people who featured in this documentary, like him, Sean Penn, Tom Cruise. Like you would have seen them, like you just said, when they first came on the scene, whereas I was seeing them already a little later into their careers. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? But it would have been exciting to see a 20-year-old Tom or 22-year-old Val Kilmer. Did it feel like you were watching a star when you saw Val Kilmer, or was he just some new guy?
I did like him immediately. I mean, I do remember vaguely enjoying Real Genius, which was like when they showed a flash of it when they said they were talking about everybody on Top Gun had already had like a film or two behind them, and then they flashed Real Genius as an example of something he did before Top Gun, and I was like, oh yeah, that was a movie that like it was kind of fun. It was like, here's a smart but cool guy. It was so funny, just like Billy Mitchell, just a nerd but a cool nerd.
Billy Mitchell, of course, if you didn't watch last episode, the iconic King Kong player, in case somebody's watching and they're like, should I know who Billy Mitchell is?
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, if you had heard the last episode, I have to say that I have to apologize because I just got a vasectomy, and I didn't realize there was going to be some repercussions, and as a result,
that's why your voice was so high.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with editing or Zoom or lag it was really just an unforeseen byproduct of a snip in a certain area.
And you know what? I admire your dedication to this show, because you went and got a reverse vasectomy this week just so you wouldn't sound like that again.
Just so I wouldn't be of a certain pitch.
You know what's funny is your voice with the compression that Zoom did last week still was deeper than mine.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, it was like, at first I thought maybe somebody might be sabotaging my deep, soulful baritone, but no, it was just the vasectomy.
You know what's funny is you mentioned Real Genius and how they like kind of flashed through it quick. You know, they flashed even quicker through MacGruber, which was one of his later roles before the throat cancer, which I love him in. He plays a villain named Kunth. It's written like cunt pretty much. And he's so funny in it. But that was the quickest mention in the montage of his movie. It's like, I was watching with Madge and she didn't even see it. I was like, oh, there was MacGruber. She was like, it was? It was like MacGruber.
Well, because it is his film, right? Like that's what you really get a sense of is that it's all from his point of view. So he's only showing the clips he wants you to see more than the ones that he wants to acknowledge, because I know you're a fan, but and he was, by the way, I wasn't a huge fan of MacGruber, but I thought he was one of the funniest parts of it, kind of thing. Because we
agree to disagree on that, because MacGruber is so good, man. It's so silly.
I know. It's just not my. It's not my cup of silly. But
I would say Val Kilmer's greatest role. I mean, what are you putting? All right. He should have spent a half hour on MacGruber.
I'm glad he's not here to hear this.
You mean? I mean, he's still alive. You just meant literally he could see this podcast.
It's true. He might tune in. I think he's got some more time on his hands, so yeah, he could tune in.
He lives close. They showed his studio on. I was just mentioning this street a couple days ago. I was driving by it with Matt, and I was like, that's a really weird street name. It's Heliotrope Ave or Drive.
Yeah, Heliotrope,
yeah, and then his studio was on Heliotrope. It showed it in the footage. I was like, damn, that's where his studio is? So we could pop in and say what's up to Val and let him know we love Real Genius and MacGruber. Is it True Genius or Real Genius?
Real Genius.
Real Genius, yeah. And everything in between, but we'll say those bookends were really what did it for each of us respectively.
Dear Lord, I think that I think he takes his work more seriously than all the than what we just put on the table right now. That's
well, what is your favorite?
You could see he really loved Jim. He loved being Jim Morrison. You could see that was something that he really put that
focused
he put
on that
forward.
hard.
Yeah.
He looked like him. You know, I actually
did.
haven't seen The Doors, but I know, like, when you put their faces side by side, you kind of almost start to see Val Kilmer when you think of Jim Morrison after a while. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was
for
a good
me as well, I saw Jim Morrison for the first time as Val Kilmer when I was a young kid. Literally, I saw Val Kilmer playing Jim Morrison before I'd seen footage of Jim Morrison. So that's why it's even more, like, inextricably linked in my brain.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've been
like
down
it?
that road too. I never saw The Doors.
Oliver Stone, too.
Yeah, did you see it?
No, and I realized while I was watching this documentary that there's a lot of Val Kilmer films I haven't seen. Like, a lot. I haven't seen Top Gun, dude.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's weird.
It's fun. It's a fun 80s, you know, big budget. Yeah.
I love early Tom Cruise, too. I mean, I love all Tom Cruise, to be honest with you. He very, very rarely misses, in my opinion, his acting and movies he chooses to do. Like, he's always been entertaining. And I love when you see the footage from that. I was like, I never realized how much Val Kilmer is hamming it up as Iceman in that movie. He's really,
yeah. That is one thing that I think in the beginning he's good at cocky. He plays cocky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what he was really bringing to the table. There is that kind of almost like on the verge of caricature villain, that kind of thing. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah.
And I loved him in Heat. Heat's a great movie, and he's great in it. That ponytail.
He's got a good face, I think, is what helps him a lot too. He's got he looks the part whenever you see him in something. He's watchable. He's very watchable.
He is. He's got a face for the big screen for sure. You mentioned Ryan Reynolds last week. I don't necessarily see the same facial features maybe, but like the kind of charisma they both emit, I get the comparison.
Yeah, that's sort of what I mean. It's like when he described himself as being like intelligent, sensitive with the soul of a clown, and it's the soul of a clown. Yeah, I know, right? He's describing himself. I think it's a soul of a clown quality, that sort of trickster quality that he has. That's where I see Ryan Reynolds, but I also see like Jack Nicholson, that same kind of trickster in him a bit as well. It's that
even
it's
a little Jim Carrey.
Thing. That's it. Like those are all kind of trickster guys.
Yeah, when you saw Jim Carrey playing the Riddler, when they showed footage from Val Kilmer's Batman, it's really hard to not look at Jim Carrey and be like, what a fucking movie star, man. Like, that Riddler role, he is going all out. And say what you want, whether that tickles your fancy or not. I mean, you can't say the guy's not going for it.
Well, yeah, he is good at going for it. I think the trouble is that what he wanted to be more beloved. His whole thing was wanting to be like Jimmy Stewart. And I think he's just too intense and has an innate darkness that he cannot hide. And no matter how much he wants to be loved, Jimmy Stewart doesn't have that same kind of darkness. So Jim Carrey could never be that type of actor that he wanted to be. Because for him, I think a lot of times too, was if he pushed it hard, that meant, he's doing a good job. Sometimes it's not about pushing it as hard as you can. Sometimes it's finding
about reining
another
it
quality. Sometimes it is. That's what we do here every week. We're reining it in.
You think I don't want to go big, Alex? I'd love to go big.
I can use every part of the screen.
I don't want to turn this into too much of a Jim Carrey thing, but he is my Jimmy Stewart, and I love the man because of his darkness as well, I might add.
Yeah, I like him for his darkness. I'm just saying that he's he can't. I don't feel like I like him in every role. I don't think like it's like I think that I like him when he is best used for what he does. Anyway, we're talking about Val today.
Yeah. You're not alone in that, by the way. And I think it actually is a good segue into talking about Val again, because that was one of my issues with this documentary. It was all his footage. The two guys who made it, the directors, both kind of openly admit that he was actively involved in the whole thing. He didn't explore the darkness enough. He said he would make allusion to people who have said I'm reckless or crazy, and then like move on. And it's like, I'm not here to judge whether you are crazy or not. I'm just saying that all of these sorts of, your reputation, that didn't just come out of nowhere. So tell me a little bit. I'm not saying you have to make this an absolution or a begging for forgiveness. I'm not saying that you've done anything worthy of begging for forgiveness. I'm just saying, give me a little bit of that. Like,
I think the problem with an autobiography is that he's going to edit we're not going to see every angle, right? And so it's the same thing. I was thinking to myself, particularly when he opens with him as a young guy, kind of cool guy, saying, I almost got fired, from like pretty much every project. I was like, almost got fired. You're not that much of a badass if you're almost getting fired all the time. The same way the other actor grabs the chair and almost throws it through the window. It's like they're not rock and roll. They're still Hollywood actors, so they're still going to follow the rules a little bit more because the budget's too big.
The budget aspect. But man, actors are certainly actors, huh? Whenever you watch actors, you're like, wow, that's an actor. Like all the cliches of how they act off camera and everything. And I'm not even trying to insult them, but like they're so clearly actors.
Yeah, they're needy.
I mean, that sounds I'm not trying to be that. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, comedians have similar traits in that respect as well. We need the love. But the thing about Val Kilmer is, like, I watched this great documentary a couple years ago that wasn't even really renowned or anything, I don't think, but it was about Patrick Swayze. And it had a lot of the same elements. They were stars around the same time, too. Patrick Swayze reached higher levels than Val Kilmer, I would argue. Not to pit them against each other, but I just mean his beloved roles like Dirty Dancing or Ghost. I don't know if Val Kilmer necessarily has that in his catalog. The point is, the documentary wasn't perfect. Like, I had Patrick Swayze as an angel figure, a cowboy, horse riding, but sculpting and dancing. He had everything. But then people in the movie, like friends of his even, were like, Patrick could be a huge asshole, man. He was an alcoholic for this huge period of time. Really? and then they'd be like, he'd go out to his ranch, and I think it was New Mexico, just like Val Kilmer, maybe it was Wyoming, whatever, the idyllic 500-acre ranch that Hollywood stars always seem to have in the middle of nowhere. And they'd be like, he would just go on a bender or whatever. But it didn't make me like Patrick Swayze less. It humanized him and made me love him more. So I'm just saying Val Kilmer's vanity project was beautiful and clearly a lot of archived footage, but I felt a little empty at the end because I knew it wasn't the full picture.
I think that what I felt like when you always, when you come to the end of any kind of documentary and you sort of see how they sum it up or if they have a few final words, I mean, if I don't feel like those final words kind of create a conclusion that wraps up what was the arc here and what are you trying to tell me about this subject matter, then I feel like, you didn't really have a thesis. You didn't really have something you want to say. Like by the end of it was more just a matter of him just saying that he had in general, it was like him saying that he had a magical life and career and, he had his sadnesses and the ups and downs and he's kind of struggling through being, the star who has to look back and sign autographs to be able to pay the bills. All that stuff adds up to, I really learned a lot about myself through this career. Kind of like this idea of breaking down your own personality and then building it back up and learning about it. That's interesting, but it didn't. I felt like what made it so special as a life, that it really needed to be told. I think that, in the beginning I started to feel like, well, wait a second. This guy's like a rich kid who lived right next to Hollywood. He was like he had like two really advantages rich. I didn't have. So already I'm thinking, am I supposed to think that, because usually you want to see a bit of a struggle even in the beginning. He went right from that to going to Juilliard, being the youngest guy going to Juilliard.
No, it did. The only pain that he did admit was his brother dying. It went.
That's right, his brother
then
dying.
Wesley dying, and then Juilliard. So I felt there was the humanity at the beginning with his brother dying, but that was it. That was yeah.
And that was, you're right. And then it kind of was just like, now here's the career of a star.
Yeah, and I don't want to diminish that because his brother dying at 15 would absolutely, obviously it's devastating. Huge. And that would stick with you his whole life. I mean, sure. Yes. Yeah. But that's what I mean is that tell me a couple more of the scars that you bear. I mean, whatever you're comfortable with. So if that's all he wanted to show, that's his decision. But me as a viewer, I'm left wanting a little more. And I agree with you completely. It feels like there wasn't much of a thesis. It seemed like life is an illusion and so is acting, and you like got it on the teacher's desk like right before the assignment was due. You're like, I was so busy looking at all this footage that I didn't figure out what the through line was, but acting is great, and it's kind of like holding a mirror to life. Here you go, I gotta get out of here.
I gotta get out of here. That's a real commitment to the final project. I think that I totally agree with you. I just feel that look, he had tragedies, and I mean, yes, he had a marriage that broke up, but even then, it's sort of thrown away. It's like, well, when you're working on something like this and you're so committed, then other people end up suffering. And the idea of like when he threw himself completely into the Jim Morrison role, that it was like hell for his wife. Like he admits these things, but it's almost forgiving yourself a bit too by saying, hey, you know what, I was committed to my art, and therefore I kind of fuck things up for everybody else a bit. Okay, and
yeah. It brings me back to the Jim Carrey thing, his documentary Man on the Moon, where he's being a dick the whole time he's playing Andy Kaufman. And you're watching it, a similar thing to what you just said about the Jim Morrison. I had the same feeling where you're like, I mean, you could have figured out a way to not annoy her. You could have bought a little studio you went to sing out Jim Morrison songs every day if that's what you needed to do.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's the famous. I mean, like it's so been told. You may have heard it. Famously like the response to method acting from like old school versus the new school with Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman. Have you heard of that one? Where Dustin Hoffman. So there's a movie in which called Marathon Man, where Dustin Hoffman's just a guy who runs, and he's just a runner, and he mistakenly gets caught up in this Nazis trying to just find out something, and they're torturing him Anyway, Laurence Olivier plays the Nazi, and so in order to prepare for the role, Dustin Hoffman just wears himself out, runs, wears himself out, all that sort of thing, and then Laurence Olivier, in response to this method way of working, he said, "Have you tried acting?" And so when you see this kind of this glorification of method acting and how everybody else around you has to suffer because you're so devoted to this role, you also think, but also maybe there's another way where people don't have to suffer. But because I don't know if everybody, there are people who aren't method actors, I believe, who do very good work as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Did you see Marathon Man?
I did.
So did you think Dustin Hoffman or Laurence Olivier, either of them had a better performance than the other?
Yeah, I mean, it might be a bit of an apples and oranges thing because it was two very different characters, right? So it's sort of hard to, like, one guy's one guy's the victim, the other one's in control. So it's really, one is worn out and terrified. So I'd have to compare Laurence Olivier's version of that guy to see how he plays worn out and terrified.
That's a great idea that I would love to see in movies, like iconic movies where the characters switch roles. You know what I mean? Just to see, like, make the same movie 2 years later, but you both take the opposite. Like, I know you don't love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I do. But if you switched Leo and Brad, gave them the same script, said we're getting back to it. I don't know if this is a good idea, but right now, boy, I think we got something on our hands here, Alex.
Yeah, I think it's called Face Off.
Greatest movie of all times, and I mean, there's no argument about that. Watching John Travolta do his best impression of Nicolas Cage and vice versa, I mean,
I actually have never seen that film either. So there's a few things we have to catch up on. You got to go see Top Gun. I got to go see that. There's a new Top Gun coming out too, right? So there is a reason to watch the old one.
Yeah, there is. I wonder if Val Kilmer will have any sort of role, even with his speaking impairment now after throat cancer. It'd be nice to see him there.
Yeah, I mean, they do these technological things where maybe they could create a character where he's got this newfangled thing that changes his voice completely, and you don't have to hear that, like as though that's his.
Yeah, they can do anything.
Some bullshit.
Tom Cruise, he's jumping from out of space for movies for Mission Impossible. I mean, he'll figure out how to, if he wants to, he'll figure out how to make Val a badass.
Yeah, let's bring Val back in. He is. I mean, I do like him though. I do like. It's funny because I do like Val Kilmer. I just.
Yeah, he's very likable.
Yeah, so I do sort of, and I do like the fact I like watching him. It reminded me right in the beginning where we first see him as a present day Val Kilmer, where he's older and he's around his apartment that's got art and knickknacks kind of all over the place in disarray, and then he walks up and he does this kind of propping himself up, this kind of like pulling up his pants, where the clown comes out. Like it's immediately he wanted you to see him as a bit of a clown.
Yeah.
That,
You're
you
right.
know?
Right from the get-go, he was very... And then even at the end when he's like pretending to be all suave and then he like falls over like he's passing out and his son puts the camera down. He's like, are you okay? And then Val's like, I'm fine. And he's like, not funny,
Yeah.
his son.
Yeah.
And he was like,
Yeah.
very, very funny.
Very, very funny.
And I'm
But
like
then what's funny is the cut between him doing it to then when he says very, very funny. I'm thinking, what kind of argument happened between that cut?
A big argument, and that's where the clown soul thing, where as I'm watching that, I go, you got to let your humanity overcome the clown soul thing in that situation, because this is your son who's been through hell watching his son have throat cancer. It's not funny, in my opinion. Because I battle that too. I'm always trying to make people laugh, and then you'll have a moment, you got to like check in with yourself. Because there's a quote, I think it was Mr. Rogers, he said, it's better to be it's better to be kind than to be right. And I kind of have shifted that into comedy, like it's better to be kind than to be funny. And so like I always have that thought, not always, but sometimes you're like about to make that joke that's right on the borderline, and you're like, is this going to hurt the person?
Yeah.
So
I know.
yeah.
I do sometimes cross that. I do sometimes decide that I'd rather sacrifice the other person's feelings for my joke.
You got to. If it's too good of a joke, you're like, they'll understand.
Well, it's or they're gonna have to learn to.
Yeah.
It is funny you should say that, because he was choosing the clown when he was looking, because there was a camera there. That's the thing. He basically said, "I'm choosing my camera over my son right now."
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of, he's a performer first, and it kind of, I guess in a way you could look at it like when he chose the Doors over his family life. You know, it's the same kind of thing. He says, "Well, I'm an artist first, and then I'm a family man."
His obsession and his early adoption of video cameras is a very kind of prescient metaphor, because, you know, some people are a little bit hard to deal with because they're always on. With his camera, it was always on, so he was always on, and that would have been like, I mean, you saw some scenes like him talking about child custody with his wife, but he had the camera sitting there. Him talking to the director of The Island of Dr. Moreau, but he was like, the director was like, turn the camera off. He's like, I have to have it on because of things you've said before. And it's like, I'm like, damn, that he might have been, imagine the early 90s. Like, we're so used to phones and everything now. But imagine early 90s, nobody has any devices, and you just got fucking Val Kilmer walking around with his big old Panasonic. Like, come on, Val.
Must have been so irritating. I mean, that must have been one of the things they were talking about when they were saying he was difficult to work with. It's like, well, you know, if a lot of just people who are just good at acting are difficult to work with. Yeah, but not everybody's got a video camera pointing at other people. But then I love it when things like that don't really make him look good. For example, when he's walking up to Brando on a hammock, and Brando's like having another, just give me a good shove, a big shove. That's all he cares about. Just give me a shove. I don't give a shit about you or your video camera.
We got to talk about Brando there, because we talked about him in
Hearts of Darkness.
Hearts of Darkness, yeah, the documentary about Apocalypse Now. And then this movie that Val Kilmer was on with him, Dr. Moreau, was even later than that, obviously, by, let's say, 15 years, maybe 17
big boy.
years.
He was a big boy.
He was really big, and even the way he just ignored Val there and said, just give me a shove, I was wondering, was that him ignoring Val, or was he, like, not all there anymore? Or, like, I don't know much about Brando's later years. That scene was really, like, there was a lot going on there. You're trying to read how he felt about Val, how Val was treating him. Like, the whole thing was really, because he was, you know, ostensibly Val Kilmer's idol, but Val Kilmer wasn't necessarily talking to him, like, reverentially.
I think that's when Val's holding the camera, it's Val wanting to get something on camera, and a lot of people aren't agreeing to this, and so they'll decide either to get angry and say turn it off, or they'll just kind of ignore it and just. I mean, Marlon Brando's just so used to everybody treating him in a certain way, like he is godlike, you know. So he just doesn't. He just turns all that off. I'm sure at that point in his life, he was just going in, showing up, collecting the paycheck, not really passionate about it anymore because he's done it all, and why keep doing the same, like why try when you've already accomplished everything? I think it's partly that, you know. Some people
I kind of want to see it.
Why would you be driven if you don't have anything, like you've achieved it all? You have to have a certain. Some people are like, I'm driven up to a point. I drove, I got there. Why do I have to keep driving?
I've reached my destination. What, I'm going to drive back? Where do you want me to go?
Now I'm just driving in circles. Come on.
Yeah, it's true. He was clearly... But I want to see The Island of Dr. Moreau now just because it sounded like such a clusterfuck.
Yeah, I'm curious to see it for... And also just that it's very much now in the news with like, you know, CRISPR gene editing as being the idea of creating hybrid... What are they? Chimera? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Me neither.
That's the name, you know, the name of the half beast, half other beast or whatever. And I'm just kind of curious to see what that take is. Although it's based on a story, I could also just read a goddamn book. But anyway.
No way. We got too many documentaries to watch. Who has time to read?
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the Batman section of the movie, I'm not going to lie, I forgot Val Kilmer played Batman. Yes. When I think of Batman, I think of, you know, Michael Keaton, the little Clooney blip on the radar. You got Bale, Christian Bale, and then in recent years, Ben Affleck, although I have a hard time even thinking of him as Batman. No. But I completely forgot about Val Kilmer.
I like the fact that Batman is like, you have to have a good mouth.
Really made you realize how great Val Kilmer's mouth, his lips were. Like,
he's got good mouth. That's why, you get cast for being a good mouth. But this idea that every kid dreams of being Batman, you know, and then it's like you're stuck in a suit. Plus, I thought it was kind of funny that says every kid dreams about being Batman. I'm like, you're already halfway there. You've got rich parents.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Early tragedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, you are Bruce Wayne, man.
You are. And then he said something, everybody dreams to be Batman, but nobody dreams to play Batman. That is a good distinction, because they always say like, wow, you know, it's a real dream, you know, I get to play this character. It's like, but playing the character it's different. Than you're not a superhero.
That suit looked like a nightmare.
Oh, wow.
It looked so heavy. He said he couldn't hear out of it. Yeah, nobody talked to him. That's brutal, man. Batman's this lonely character, and then everybody's just perpetuating that because... Hey, what are you guys talking about over there? Never mind, Batman.
It's like, and months of that too. This is not just like a couple of days of feeling lonely. Yeah, it took its toll.
He said he didn't want to do the next one, and he chose to do The Saint instead. But I read online that he wasn't offered another one because Joel Schumacher, the director, just wanted to murder him because he was such a hassle to deal with. Now, I'm not saying who's right there, because even directors have something when a movie bombs. They have their own ulterior motives for pinning the blame elsewhere. But that was another account of the situation.
To make it sound like it was his choice to not do it, and then he ends up doing something.
You can't fire me. I quit.
And then he does something that people don't really end up seeing. What was it? Say it again. Sorry. What did he end up doing again?
When I think of The Saint,
I
think of that as a death knell in his like A-list career in my memory. Like I remember that being such a big bomb that you never really saw him again after that.
I kind of and that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, was that a bad choice, or was it just bad luck, or
or
it's
your
very
Bourne-esque. Yeah. Right, it's very Jason Bourne-esque, but Bourne came a few years later and just, you know, did so well. And that. But you know what's funny is when you even look at the montage of his characters from The Saint, you're like, wow, he was even hamming it up in this too. He was kind of Zoolander-esque.
Yeah, when you did see him, when it felt like it was a. Was it like that, like a Dana Carvey project? You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And then I think to myself, yeah, I mean, maybe you're just not suited to do that kind of thing. I mean, I get, like, we all have our strong suits, you know, and he's, I just think that when he's trying to play different characters, he doesn't seem mercurial in that way, like bouncing from one thing to the next. I think that he can commit to one thing, and then he plays it with a certain intensity, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. But who knows? You know, I haven't seen it, and maybe, you know, Hollywood's so fickle that if that movie destroys at the box office, we're talking about a whole different career trajectory for Val Kilmer. So, like, even if you look at Ryan Reynolds now, like, his new movie, Free Guy, is doing really well from what I hear. Deadpool, obviously, has done really well for him. But he had a string of bombs.
That's
like,
true.
I remember being like, how the hell does he keep getting more opportunities? So maybe the difference between them is, and I know nothing about them either of them personally, but maybe Val was so difficult to work with that the bombs were less tolerable. Who knows? This is all conjecture because he didn't reveal any of that in his documentary, so I don't know.
We can't know. Yeah, we can't know with this stuff. It really is difficult to really get. We're not getting all sides of the story, which does make it difficult to say this is a really great portrait because we're just seeing one side and it's from his side, and so you're missing a lot of what could make it more dramatic.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know something I noticed? That movie is like, what, an hour and 45 minutes, whatever it is. Not a single friend.
Right. Wow,
Like,
that's a really good point.
You see his wife and then later ex-wife and then his 2 kids, his son and daughter. You see Sean Penn and Tom Cruise, but they don't look particularly happy to be in it. They end up mooning the screen, but you're not sensing much conviviality there, in my opinion. But later years, you know, not saying it has to be a Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks type love affair or something like that. That's the two that...
That's right.
They were always together.
Yeah, that's right.
But you know, friendship is sustaining for people, and you didn't see any of it.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing the way he lives now, I mean, he is, you know, he has the difficulty with the voice and all that, but there's still a sense of like, I don't know, just the way the interior of his home looks. It feels like it's a bit all over the map. It feels like he's a bit reclusive looking, and it's a bit of that look to it. You know, and I think part of it, I think he is kind of the cocky guy. I think that's one thing that he's not really being upfront about. I think he does have a cockiness about him, which made him kind of a pain in the ass to have to hang out with. You know, if he's got a bit of that Iceman in him, then who really wants to hang out? And then...
Everyone's like, you can't be my wingman anymore.
yeah. He's.
Sorry, keep going. You were on a roll.
No, it's
there.
okay. It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I just feel that it comes through a little bit. Like when he says things like, and then I became, you know, he went into a deep depression, and that like painting saved him. He went back to his painting, and then and then he says that he found a studio that big enough to hold his ideas. Like it's so, that's pretty self-aggrandizing when you see what big ideas are we talking about, like spray painting God on a with a stencil.
Yeah.
Like that's a big idea.
Self-aggrandizing was the word that came into my mind when I finished watching it. But then I was like, I always forget, is aggrandizing good or bad? Is it the same as deprecating or the opposite? But you verified it. Yes, the whole documentary felt very self-aggrandizing. Mythologizing as well.
Even when he was talking about his tragedies, it was in order to show that he has a deep soul. I mean, when it came to the tragedies of, let's say, the family suffering from his art, he didn't really. It's not like he kind of glossed over it a little bit. You know what I mean? It wasn't like really like I'm going to kind of cut myself up a little bit in order to show that I'm aware of this and I'm remorseful of it.
Have you seen the documentary about Roger Ebert?
No, I don't think I have actually.
Dude. So I read a review on RogerEbert.com, so this is kind of connected. He's obviously passed away, but one of his contributors to his website wrote a lot of what we've said about this Val documentary. Like, it was kind of too fluffy and self-aggrandizing and all that. Right. But if you want to look at a movie that actually does it well, Ebert's documentary, and he dealt with, I think it was throat cancer. He ended up having his face removed. Maybe it was tongue cancer. It was a terrible cancer. Yeah. But that documentary, and again, I'm not saying Val Kilmer has to do this or had to, because whatever you're comfortable with. But Roger Ebert took you down that struggle. Like, he took you into the doctor's room, the hospital room every day, showed what his wife was going through. And until the end. Like, the movie ends when he dies. It's one of the most moving things you'll ever watch. And Val Kilmer, but I guess because Val Kilmer's fingerprints were all over this, it becomes a reflection of who he was as a person. So I don't feel like it made me know him any less. I feel like it made me know exactly who he is. He's this guarded guy who wants to show you some of his flaws, but still wants to keep you at a bit of a distance. And even his, vanity project, his documentary, reflects that kind of ethos.
Yes. I think that's where the soul of the clown comes out, is that the clown doesn't really necessarily want to show you that deep into it. Like that's when we saw him alone, he would confess a few things, but he also liked to show that he's a bit of a clown, and you don't know. I mean, that's it. When he does the, you don't know if I'm dead or alive. I mean, that's not fully letting you in, because he's letting you know that some things might be false. What I'm showing you, we don't, he is keeping it a bit vague in that way.
And we gotta talk about the scene where he's looking. It's not for a movie. It's him looking into his own camera, cutting his hair off with like a knife, talking about how brutal the movie industry is and how they do these contracts. I forget what the contracts were called.
Oh yeah, he was talking pay to play, where like you're giving up your soul and your opinions and all that.
Your life but he's like so dramatic, and it's not for a movie. It's him with his own camera chopping his hair off while he's talking about it. And you're like, what is this? When did you record this? What was it for?
For who? Yeah. And when you're talking about all this, and you're doing it just for yourself, you're still an actor. You're still playing pretend.
Yeah.
They take away your opinions, your soul. It's what they say about the Indians say about the photograph stealing your soul. We know all about that.
I love when people present stuff like that as like you did the opposite earlier. You were like, I'm sure you've heard of this famous Laurence Olivier Dustin Hoffman spat. And I'm like, no, have a lot of people heard of that? But he did the opposite, where he was like presenting it like it was this really, he was like, the Indians say that the camera steals your soul. You're like, well, tell me more about this.
And it does. Yeah. I think that does betray a certain level of what depth he has, if that's the great insight that he has about, I'm like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, watch TikTok for a while. You'll see a lot of souls being stolen. People not even coming up with anything creative, just ripping, just doing karaoke versions of culture.
Oh, baby, the best soulless entertainment you can find on TikTok. I'd like to thank our sponsors, TikTok, for sponsoring us for the first time this week.
And also the First Nations, the Ojibwe, the Cherokee, and many of the other tribes.
Honestly, I don't want to shit on Val Kilmer, but things like that were like kind of, you're like, okay, it's not that. But he was self-aware, too. You saw him in conversations with James Lipton where he was like, I can't complain about this because I am still just acting. Like, he knew. So, again, I don't want to shit on him. I get that that's a cutthroat industry, too. Like, I'm not in it, but I've read books about it. I have this
Oh, nice.
There's this great book that happened to be beside me. I don't think they mentioned Val Kilmer in it, but it's called Powerhouse, and it's about the history of CAA, the Creative Artist Agency.
Okay, right, yes.
And so many cat hairs just came up from me grabbing that book. I read it 5 million years ago, but no. So just learning about how these agents figure out what clients are getting their roles, and how easy it is for clients to fall off the top of the A list or even the B list in one bad role, or a director not wanting to work with them, or any of that. So that I understand that a lot of people go crazy within the Hollywood studio system. So I'm not even saying I don't understand. I just think, I don't know. If it was one part of an overall larger picture that he was painting for us, awesome. But because he didn't give me much else to chew on in the movie, I'm like, I don't need to listen to this as a primary source of your pain. But I will say the Wesley, his brother dying thing did hit me hard. And his brother was very talented, because the movies he was making, the footage he showed in that time, it would have been very hard to edit, never mind film and put. So Wesley, like, I was very impressed by that, and I felt that loss. Like, I understood how that must have affected him.
Yeah, I don't know what it feels like to lose someone so close. I mean, I know parent or whatever, but the idea of a brother, like, where it's near your, that will mess with you quite a bit. I was trying not to allow my mind to come up with a dark joke about not being able to tell that someone's having a seizure in a jacuzzi. I really was trying not to, but it happened.
Val Kilmer would appreciate that joke.
Just, just what with the churning and the bubbling, sometimes it's hard to see what's going on.
What a tragic way to die.
Oof.
Just an epileptic fit in a jacuzzi. And then he said his dad was never the same after that. Didn't even have the energy to have affairs anymore. That's tough. You're in mourning when you can't even
So
summon
terrible.
the nerve to have extramarital affairs anymore. Look what this did to me.
Summon the nerve. Yeah, it is. But again, I just realized that I didn't realize that until you just said it, that Val would forgive that joke. Because yes, I did make the choice of the joke over the caring about somebody else's feelings. Huh.
You did.
Anyway, it feels like it really brought that around for me. I didn't even think of that. But if you're thinking about what is the psychological makeup of a man, you look at the father, and this is a guy who was ambitious and who wanted to be a great land baron, apparently, and also the idea that he bought all these acres so that way he could make plots of land, so that way he could choose his neighbors.
Choose your neighbors. Wow. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You look at the man a lot of times and you see, that's another reason, because he talked about the extramarital affairs his dad had and all that stuff. And I'm like, so what'd you do? You were just married and that's your whole life? You don't have to give me all the dirt, but come on, dude. I'm not saying it has to be. Sorry?
Don't just tell on pops. Fess up a little bit for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, a sinning man like my father raised an angel like me. Who would have thought that I could break the cycle in one generation?
I mean, even if he just said, if he started talking about that seeing that, the similarities between himself and his father, that would give us a little something too. Now we have you're now painting a portrait of a man yourself.
Yeah.
Make some connections, But, he wanted to show his home movies, and I understand. He had all that footage. He didn't want it to go to waste.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I guess that's a good enough reason, even if it didn't get all this fanfare.
How long did it take? How long did it take to go through all that footage?
It was a long time. I think 10 years. There's a new footage, or maybe it was sitting underground for 10 years. But
just the fact that he had to, did he just cherry pick and go, I think I remember something from that? Or did he actually watch all that stuff to find what were the best moments in his opinion?
Yeah, but if another editor had access before him, I bet you it's a whole different movie, because his favorite moments were definitely not the favorite moments of an outsider. We're two in our own heads to make that decision.
Yeah,
and we don't want we don't want to look bad.
Exactly.
I'm not even faulting him. If you don't want to give the public your dirt, that's fine. But as a viewer, I might not necessarily like it as much.
Absolutely. I'm very guilty of that myself. I don't want anybody seeing me slip up for a second.
I know. Yeah, even when I try to reveal something about myself, it's got to be on a stand-up stage in a controlled setting, and I'm controlling the narrative. And I'm still going to make you laugh quick after I tell you that bit about myself. And let's move on. Don't mention it again.
That's right. and I'll record it, and if it's good, I'll show other people. But otherwise, nobody besides the people in this room will know that this happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you learn, Alex, from Val, the documentary about Val Kilmer?
That's a really good question. I don't want to say not much because that's not nice. But
you can be honest.
I don't know. What did I learn? I think there were probably a couple of moments there. I think that. I learned that it doesn't matter how successful you are, you could end up, you're at the end of your life can be out of your control in terms of whether in terms of health, but also in terms of where your career is at, and the fact that having to go around signing autographs to pay the bills. There are people who have not led the magical life he has, but might have a much more fulfilling and less stressful in a way. Later life, it's sometimes you're giving up one to get the another. You might not be so lucky to have have it all, and so just seeing that made it clear. But I also appreciated the fact that he did say that he tried to reframe it for himself instead of getting depressed about it. It's just focus on the fact that it's the fans. He's meeting his fans, and as long as he really means that, because sometimes he looked really weary throughout a lot of those moments.
But he did just come through throat cancer, so you got to give him the benefit of the doubt on that, too.
For sure.
The fact he doesn't, yeah, that was kind of tough to watch, but also it's nice. It's like, I guess it's rewarding for the fan to see him, too, if you're that big of a fan. But there is something odd about, and again, not judging him, but there is something odd about seeing somebody, like, go sign autographs for something that's so far in the past.
Yeah.
But I think I'm alone, or maybe I'm not alone, but I think I got to recalibrate my brain, because I'm like, they did make that. They were in that. So if it's special to people, I shouldn't take that away from them. But man, it was a long time ago.
That's a long, pretty much the beginning of your career. You have this long career, and everybody goes. I always think about that when somebody's from Saturday Night Live. Like inevitably, people think of them as, no matter what they do for the rest of their career, they're always a Saturday Night Live player.
Yeah. But, that sentiment I have, I often feel the opposite, where somebody who's done a lot in their career will pop back up in the news, and I'll see a lot of youngins who don't know them be like, who's this fucking clown? And I'm like, this clown made 4 of the top movies of the early 2000s. You know what I mean? So you're like, you don't know because you weren't there. So it can go both ways. But I'll make mine quick. What I relearned he was in Batman. I forgot that.
That's a good thing to learn.
Yeah, got to update my mental Batman list.
Yeah, for sure.
How'd you feel?
I was a little annoyed sometimes. It's sort of the vanity aspect of it. Like my wife says, so his name is Val, and he made a movie called Val? Sounds gross.
I mean, that's a very simple and accurate observation.
Pretty much. For him to say that he connects with Mark Twain, and then does one man, like a one man show where he's pretty much just quoting. It's like doing karaoke stand up. He's just quoting somebody else's stand up.
Ooh, but that's acting is too, no? I guess yeah, he was quoting. Yeah, but he put a lot of effort
funny
into
line
it.
though. Was that his line when he said when somebody said that he took questions from the audience and they said, "Why are we here?" And he says, well, "He paid $70." Didn't you hear that?
I don't know if that's Mark Twain or Val Kilmer, but
yeah,
it was one of those American legends.
It sounds like a stock line somehow. It just sounds so classic.
It does.
Yeah,
it's like no, it's not a stock line, but this line always makes me laugh. I was in a movie theater when I was young. This is terrible, and I don't condone it, but it's stuck in my memory. I was like 15. I want to hear this. I was at a theater, and there were these 2 guys just talking the whole movie. Forget what movie it was, but they were just talking, and a lot of people were annoyed. And finally, some lady yells out, like, "Would you guys please shut up?" And the guy yells back from the darkness, "If I wanted your lip, I'd undo my pants." And
dear Lord.
The whole theater laughed. Like, we hated this guy, and we still laughed at his joke because it was so quick, and I feel bad for laughing. And that woman was our representative, and we betrayed her so quickly.
Exactly,
that's the power
betrayed her,
of
and also
joke.
that was highly inappropriate and a verbal assault.
He should have been ushered out. It was 20 years ago. I was also 15. All of this stuff was not swirling around my brain yet. But I did feel bad for laughing, so I did have empathy, but damn if it didn't get the whole theater rocking.
Rocking. Yeah.
But terrible, man, and I don't condone it. I
understand what you're saying.
The final question, where do we go from here?
Oh, Lord. Well, I'm going to what he called, what was it, like the pit of hell or whatever the hell he called it? The valley. I'm going to the valley. He was talking about how he lived
yeah, you're moving there. I'm
moving to the
pit of hell. What were you thinking while you watched that? Where you're like, because sometimes you watch something and have reframed your opinion of a place. Did it make you think less of the valley from him saying it?
Yeah, that's a little bit. I mean, I kind of get it though. Like he grew up there, and he's talking about Chatsworth. That's up there. I feel like if you're below the 101, it's a little different than when you're above the 101. That's my feeling on the valley. I'm in Studio City. You know what I mean? I'm not really in Chatsworth. So I that's what I was telling myself.
It's true. It is still hot as hell up there in Studio City. The difference from there, I mean, you've been moving back and forth. You feel it. It's like a 10-degree difference when you go from here to there on the same day.
I'm terrified.
I'll answer. How'd I feel? I didn't answer, so I'll do a 2-for-1 here. I felt a lot of the same stuff you felt, and I actually stopped watching it at some point and started it again like 2 days later because I was just like kind of bored a little bit. Right. So I wasn't the most enraptured by it, but I felt heartwarming moments at points, like when he revealed himself.
Right.
And where do we go from here? I mean, I guess I'll watch Top Gun. I think it's time. I think that's
you know what? I think it'll be cheesy fun. Like I think it's a very popcorn movie, kind of like, you know. I mean, if you like Tom Cruise, then you know you'll get that kind of Tom Cruise right there.
You know you're gonna get Tom Cruise giving his all. That's what I like about the man. I've never watched the movie and be like, oh, he phoned it in. You know?
No, he never does he?
No, he doesn't. I watched Jack Reacher, for the love of God, Jack Reacher, and I like it.
Oh, did you? I actually haven't seen that yet. I mean, it almost makes you want to join Scientology. What commitment.
Well, worth looking into. It can't hurt to stop by. It's right on the corner there. Just say hi.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. I hope to be a celebrity. Can I come in? Yeah.
All right, so that was Val. It was a fun little jaunt.
Yeah, something to do, right?
Look through somebody else's memories. Yeah.
Well, we have something for next week. Is that not correct?
Tell the viewers and listeners what next week will bring.
Next week we will be watching, and then subsequently talking about 3 Identical Strangers. If I'm getting it right, yes.
I think so. Yeah. HBO. I can't remember.
On like Netflix or something like that. You
Maybe.
Know what?
You look it up.
What? Like you can't search? You can't use a search engine?
All right. Well, 3 Identical Strangers next week, and as always, been a pleasure having you guys. I'm DJ.
I'm Alex.
See you guys later.